Good morning. Today is Monday. It is the 6th day of Teves. And today we're finishing chapter 7 in Tanya, Likutei Amarim. Now, chapter 7, just to review a little bit the beginning of the chapter. After discussing and describing what is the godly soul, the animal soul, and we have the different faculties of the soul. Alter Rebbe, in last chapter, started talking about the nefesh, the animal soul. And just like in the godly soul, you have the 10 faculties, the intellectual faculties, and and the emotional faculties. And then you have the 3 garments, the thought, speech, and action. You have this in the godly soul. The same thing you have also in the animalistic soul. And while by the godly soul, the 3 garments, thought, speech, and action, elevate the soul to a place where the soul itself cannot be. Why? Because the thought, speech, and action are all God's thoughts and God's speech. We're talking about the thought, speech, and action of godliness. So the same thing is true also on the other side, that the thought, the speech, and action of doing not good things, the thought, speech, and action of the impure things, it affects the neshama. It brings it down much lower than where it was. And Alter Rebbe explains that we're talking about the impure places, you have 2 levels of impurity. One, the lower one, is what is called the sholosh klipis atmeis, the 3 shells, the total impure shells. And these 3 shells, he says, this was the place where this is the ultimate impurity that cannot be fixed, that cannot be elevated. And the only time when this is going to be fixed is when Mashiach comes. Now, when a person does something, where does these 3 impure shells, the total impurity, where do we see those impurities? We see it in doing, when a person violates the Torah, when he do something. For example, it says the souls of the impure things, the non-kosher things, non-kosher animals, or non-kosher things that grow. For example, the laws of Orla, the first 3 years that the fruit of the tree is called Orla, you're not allowed to eat it. It is forbidden fruit. And he says the word forbidden in Hebrew is asur, and that also means tied, because it's tied to the ultimate impurity that you cannot elevate. However, so this was talking about the ultimate impurity. And the same thing is also the energy that comes from doing things, the energy of thinking and speaking, all those kind of things that is totally impure. They are also all connected with the with the ultimate impurity that cannot be elevated. That was in last chapter. Now in this chapter, chapter 7, the Alter Rebbe explains about the second level of kalipa, of shells, of the impurity. We said there are two levels. So one of them is the kalipa, which is called sholosh klipas atmeis, the three ultimate impurities, ultimate shells, impure shells. And the second level is what is called klipas noiga, the shell of noiga. This is all based on the verse in the prophet Yecheskel. It's talking about the three levels and talking about the noiga leisaviv. The noiga surrounds it. Now the word noiga, it means light, and it is a shell that covers godliness, but it still has a potential for light. And this, he's talking about everything which is permissible. All neutral things in this world are part of this klipas noiga. This shell, which is noiga, which means potentially it can become good. And on the other end, it can be drawn down to the three lower levels of klipas. What does it mean? So anything that a person that we have available to us, the kosher animals, has their sustenance comes from noiga. Now, what happens with this? So when a person does them, when a person eats it in the proper way, meaning he does it for Hashem, he does it to become to become strong, to be able to serve Hashem, then that shell is being elevated. That energy that is in this food is being elevated to the higher places, to the kedusha, to the world of holiness. And if your person does it, not even for bad reasons, if he does it just because, I'm hungry, I want to eat. Not even if he eats it for wrong reasons. If he eats it for just not for the right reason, then it goes down to the sholosh klipas atmeis. But it goes down temporarily. And when it goes down temporarily, and you can elevate it when you take the same energy and you do it again, you do teshuvah, and you elevate it. You elevate it by doing teshuvah and using the energy to study something positive, to do something in kedusha. Now, the same thing when a person eats and something or so on. However, when a person, God forbid, has if a person eats not kosher things, so what happens then, this is connected forever. Now, what does it mean? We have to clarify one thing. When we're talking about connected forever, in the impurity, we have to separate between the person and the effect that we did in this world. Meaning, the person himself can do teshuvah no matter what. Even if a person caused to bring down to this world very low kalipa impurities. For example, when a person has improper relationships and it brings down the impurities, and it is connected with this, in this physical world, connected with something physical. And that is something that a person cannot purify, cannot elevate, except in one thing, except in actually two ways. One is when Mashiach comes, it elevates. The other one is saying yesterday's class that if a person does teshuvah, but it's not a regular teshuvah, but it's called a teshuvah me'ahava, is a teshuvah out of deep love, that such a level of teshuvah that turns the sins into merits. When a person does such a shuvah, he's able to elevate even those things that went down to the lowest place. But again, to clarify that we're talking about two things. When we're talking about the person himself to do teshuvah, anybody can do teshuvah, no matter what a person did, and no matter how low. That you can do teshuvah, and the teshuvah will be accepted. A person becomes okay with Hashem. However, in order to change the effect that it brought, that it created, by doing certain aveira, certain sins, it creates such impurities, energies, and impurity. In order to change that, you need the second level. And in today's Shir, the Alter Rebbe is going to talk about a third level, something which is talked about in Kabbalah, in books, about the sin of wasting seed. And it says this: on the one hand, even though it's not listed among the forbidden relationships, but yet it says on the one hand, the impurity that spreads by doing this, because after all, God gave us a gift of reproduction, and that was meant for that purpose. And wasting seeds is like bringing a big amount of impurity into this world. But at the same time, it is not as difficult to elevate like improper relationships, because here there is no recipient, and therefore, when a person does teshuvah, you don't need the deeper level of teshuvah. The regular level of teshuvah elevates that person, and also through having proper kavana while saying the kriya Shema, while saying the Shema. So let's look inside in today's portion. Says the Alter Rebbe, but the vitality that comes out in the drops of semen that went out in a wasteful manner, even though this energy goes down into the three levels of the impure kalipos, it is nevertheless, it goes out from that place when a person does the proper teshuvah. And he talks about the regular teshuvah, the proper teshuvah, but it's not talking about you do not need necessarily to get to the higher level of teshuvah. Even with the regular teshuvah, a person is able to bring it up. And one more thing, and when a person has intense concentration and devotion, when he say the Shema during the bedtime, there's a special Shema that we say in addition to the Shema that we say in the evening by the Meyer of prayer, we say Shema during the bedtime. Kanoida Ma'arizal, as the Ari of blessed memory, Rabbi Tzukluya said about the Shema. In the Rumas Gemara, it is also indicated, it is implied in the Talmud, in the saying, Kol hakoyre kriya shema al mitosai, keilu oiches cherev sheshtei piyes chulu. He who recites the Shema at bedtime is as if he held a double-edged sword. And he says, what does it mean? La'aroi gufei sachitzoinim shenasu levush lachayus shebatipis. It means that with this double sword, it is to slay the bodies of the chitzoinim. What is the chitzoinim? The klipis. The chitzoinim, chitzon means an external force. That is the klipis, the impure, where they become a lavush, a garment to these energy that is in the semen, and this bodies, these bodies that was created by the chitzonim need to be eliminated, and that is done through saying the Shema. And what does it mean with he spoke about intense concentration? It's literally to understand the words, what you're saying. And the energy that was vested in them goes up and goes away from the kedusha, from the impurity into the kedusha. And it is known to the students of the Kabbalah. He says, therefore, this is why the sin of wasteful emission of semen is not mentioned in the Torah among the list of forbidden relationships. And although it does mention in the Torah about the story with and Onan, the children of Yehuda, that they died because of this, but it doesn't say clearly in the Torah among the forbidden relationships. And in the oral Torah, it talks about how severe it is. So he says we shouldn't mistake thinking the fact that we can elevate it. We shouldn't mistake the thing that this is not severe. So he says, in a way, it is even more severe than improper relationship. Why? It says, because this brings more it is greater in regard to the abundance of impurity in klipis shemoilid, that the klipis that is creating, and it brings tremendously more so when you do omit zera levatala, this a wasteful seed. And this is more an improper relationship. However, what the difference is, why is it easier to fix? He says, because but when there's improper relationship there, a person adds more strength, more energy into a lower level of klipa, because you have there a recipient, and therefore you cannot be elevated from there with regular tshuva. And the only way is that when a person does such teshuva, that the zdainis, that the intentional sins becomes like merits. And the Alter Rebbe explains here in the note, why is it though? The reason is that through forbidden relationship, the vitality has been absorbed by the level of yesod in the female element of klipa. And the female element of klipa are mekabeles v'koletes chayis v'kedusha. They received and absorbed the vitality from the holiness. This is just as the physical semen is absorbed within the female. In the case of these sins, the same thing is in the spiritual level. it is absorbed in the klipa. And that's why you can't take it out from there so easy. That's only if a person does real teshuvah, or when the Mashiach comes. But this is not so with wasteful emission. Because there is no female element of klipa. So only the klipa's power and force encompasses the vitality of the siman. It is known to the students of Kabbalah. And here concludes the Alter Rebbe, Yuvan. But this will understand the saying of our sages. What is, there is a verse that says, that a person who is fault that cannot rectify. So our sages tell us, who is that person? It says the Talmud in Chagiga, who is that person that did fault and cannot rectify? That a person, anyone who had a relationship with not an improper relationship and who gave birth to a mamzer, gave birth to an illegitimate child, a mamzer, a bastard, what is called. If a person, that's for example, if a person has an incestual relationship and a child is born, so once the child is born, there's nothing you can do. You cannot fix that thing. Because then, even when a person does real deep teshuvah, he cannot cause the vitality to ascend to sanctity. Since it has already descended into this world and has been clothed in a body of flesh and blood. So that is why when things that you do, a person does that brings down into the sholosh klipisat me'is, the way of fixing it is through deeper teshuvah, or when Mashiach comes. Again, this is regarding the effect that was caused as a result of the action. But as far as the person himself, anybody can do teshuvah, and the way of doing teshuvah is in an instant. And yes, if we need to fix other things, we have a lifetime of things to do. So this is the end of today's shir. Minutes Hashem, tomorrow we'll continue with chapter 8.
Rabbi